In life, it's important to grasp this principle. You must know when to hold 'em, and you must know when to fold 'em. So regarding this Kenya situation, I actually wanted to do a separate analysis for her, considering the fact I believe she recently posted her confessional stating her side of the story. And I love the fact that she mentioned that she also wanted to, be granted the opportunity to control her own narrative. And what's really interesting? I also felt compelled to come back up here and elaborate a little bit more on Kenya regarding, this whole situation with her fellow castmate. A little bit more considering my most recent analysis talking about these individuals. But I wanted to highlight something that I feel like is very significant regarding this situation, especially after reviewing you all's comments. And as I stated, I love when you guys give me feedback. I love when you guys share your opinions because it's designed for us to have open dialogue. And I wanted to build upon the points that I was trying to make and that some people were able to pick up on and maybe some other people weren't able to perceive. So I wanted to be as direct as I could in this particular analysis. The situation with Kenya and how everything went down is a classic example of understanding when leaving is leverage. And for those who aren't familiar with the phrase know when to hold them, know when to fold them, it comes from poker, the game of poker, which is also referenced in the book In the Lion's Den, Navigating Systems of Power. But it's this concept of knowing when you're not holding the best cards and gracefully bowing out of the game before you end up jeopardizing something, right? You end up jeopardizing a huge sum of money, or in Kenya's case, right, a position, an opportunity. And what I loved, because I watched her confessional, and what I loved about it is she was honest enough and transparent. For one, for those who haven't watched the confessional, I strongly encourage you to watch Kenya's side because I believe taking in all sides and taking them into consideration is very important. And some people have concluded that I took, one person's side over the other. And I want to clarify that I don't know these ladies personally enough to take a side. However, when it comes to dissecting professional spaces, and if you all are familiar with my channel, you hear me reference it as systems of power, you have to understand how these systems operate. And nevertheless, in Kenya's confessional, she did take accountability for the fact that she shouldn't have done what she did, especially not at her own event, which I completely commend her for. She also proceeded to explain why she felt compelled to do so, and it was an attempt to defend herself. Nothing about her reasoning in that regard was disregarded on my channel whatsoever. And I completely understood it. And on several occasions, I stated that I believe both ladies had their fair share of, maybe overplaying their hand in certain situations, which is completely normal considering, the nature of their workplace, right? Which it's all about drama. It's all about engagement. So sometimes things can get out of hand due to the fact the nature of their work is to provide as much entertainment for viewers as possible. So I never took any sides because I understood the fact that this is the foundation of the work that they do. So lines can easily become blurred as far as what is grounds for overstepping certain professional boundaries, especially when we talk about legalities, policies, and procedures. Also love the fact that Kenya clarified that she did speak to a legal representative and they provided some context as far as, well, this isn't necessarily grounds for X, Y, and Z. However, when we talk about the grand scheme of things, right, especially when you're working under someone else's program, they are going to do everything in their power to cover their ends legally. Now, another thing that I wanted to highlight about this situation. So first and foremost, let me go ahead and put this out here. As I stated before, I strongly encourage you guys to hear Kenya's confessional in its entirety to gain some context as far as why she approached the situation the way that she did. It was very informative, and she also did take accountability in her video. And Edie also took accountability in an interview that she recently did as well. So both ladies have taken accountability in the role that they played. Now, in my previous analysis where I've been talking about Kenya and the situation, I also mentioned Portia. What's also important to take into consideration is Portia took accountability for the fact that, I can't believe I did that. And even after her departure, post that reunion altercation, when she came back, she was more intentional about how she reacted and how she responded. So we're not pointing the finger at, well, this person acted like this because this person did this. That is not what these analyses are about. Let's go ahead and get this out the way. You cannot control another person's reaction or responses, but you have every responsibility to control how you react and how you respond, because you will always be held accountable for it. And in the context of navigating professional spaces, this symbolic lion's den, right? Navigating these systems of power, prominent positions, you have to understand that when you choose to respond or react, yeah, you could have great arguments for, well, the reason why I did this is because of this. What they're paying attention to is the fallout. And in several of my community posts and in previous analyses, I've talked about the fact that there are situations where people who you answer to, right, people who are in a quote unquote higher up position, are going to make decisions based upon two things: the lesser of two evils, or what's going to benefit the organization and the company overall in the long run. And in these circumstances, the reason why you retaliated or reacted the way that you did becomes irrelevant. The year's worth of experience and time that you spent with this organization or with this company also becomes irrelevant. And most importantly, your emotions are a non-factor. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, because now people are doing the best that they can to preserve the legacy of the organization. You have to think this is a system that they are operating. There are other positions, there's funding that they have to protect, so you just have to be mindful of that. Now, another thing that stood out to me is this, and the reason why this analysis is titled what it's titled. There were some people arguing the fact that, well, also, the decision that they made was probably better for their pockets. Now, of course, I can't speak for the network, but when people presented this argument, I said, this also makes perfect sense, right? So if we're thinking about budgeting, you keeping a newcomer whose salary is clearly going to be significantly lower than somebody who has seniority, and they also have, these accolades and these achievements, that's also a great incentive for you to maybe switch gears, shift some things up, bring in a new cast member. And it ties back to, as I stated before, the title. Understanding when it is best for you to fold your cards rather than fighting to hold them, because there are other systemic factors at play. And this is why I keep encouraging you all to become familiar with navigating systems of power, and why I keep talking about this symbolic lion's den, because if you're still assessing things at the surface level, people within these systems are going to continue to run circles around you. I'm going to be honest. As I stated in my Black Swan analysis, if you're still battling with even minute situations, feelings of jealousy, feelings of envy, feelings of competitiveness, you're not going to last. Why? Because those are feelings that are deeply rooted in personal emotions. There's no logic, there's no strategy, there's no objectivity. And in these systems, in these spaces, they're thinking about the longevity of the company. They're thinking about funding, budget cuts, legalities. So 9 times out of 10, there's no room for emotions when you're trying to make sure that your ship doesn't sink. And as I've been doing the best that I can to prepare you all for what I've been calling this quote unquote new era, which is just me, throwing a little bit of, wording onto it to make it, entertaining. But nevertheless, I've been doing the best that I can to prepare you all for the kind of content that I've been putting out regarding office politics and work politics, navigating systems of power, because understanding your emotions and how other people act out of emotions is a prerequisite before you start to navigate these prominent spaces. So when we talk about these concepts of social climbing, working towards your overall goals, attaining some kind of achievement, you have to understand that that requires strategy. And in order to implement any kind of strategy, you first have to have clarity. And 9 times out of 10, if you are acting out of emotion, you are intoxicated. You are not in a sober or a clear enough state to make any sound decision. So understand this. Let's just go ahead and get this out the way on this channel. You always have a choice, right? You can choose to navigate these spaces, but you also have a choice to back out of them. And that's what this analysis is going to be dedicated for today. Because I think a lot of the time we find ourselves frustrated because we're trying to straddle the fence. If you choose to align yourself with these systems, you have to understand how they work. Now, you have ample opportunity, you have free will, you have choice to decide, okay, The way that this is operating, my values, my morals, it doesn't necessarily align with the way that this system is structured. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot into something else. That's separate territory. But if you're trying to hold on to your way of doing things and you're not acknowledging the fact that no, when you're navigating systems, there are embedded codes of conduct. And those codes of conduct are what keeps the system upheld, right? It keeps that systemic structure. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. So I'm making content regarding the Lion's Den, individuals who are striving for a certain kind of success, prominence, right? I'm preparing them for what they are going to come up against when I make these analyses, right? And it has nothing to do with you becoming a predatory person yourself. Instead, it has everything to do with perceiving the predatory personalities and implementing strategy to protect yourself. And one of the things that you're going to have to do, or one of the things that you're going to have to prepare for, is emotional attacks. When people are trying to provoke you into making a counterproductive response. And this is why understanding this principle of leaving is leverage. And ironically enough, another Real Housewives, alum at this point, Garcelle, and I made a TikTok stating that at some point you have to leave the Invalidation Olympics, right? So that is a stark difference of a way to approach when the odds are stacked against you and knowing when it is necessary for you to pivot, right? Knowing when you are battling and fighting up against a brick wall. Another thing that I want people to understand is this, right? If you realize, because I know that Kenya in her confessional, her most recent video, she talked about how, well, people are saying if I really had an issue, why not go to like producers or staff about it? And I did. So in those situations where people are not necessarily taking your concerns into consideration, that is ample opportunity for you to maybe start getting your ducks in a row to leave. Because there are also some situations where people have already kind of made a decision to proceed forward with something else or some other talent, and they're trying to cycle you out. And rather than allowing the rug to be pulled from right up under you, and for those who have the book Green Eyes, you all are familiar with that technique, you implement a course of action to just go ahead and pivot preemptively. And the way that these types of dynamics happen in the workplace can be better understood by visiting the section titled Top of the Pyramid in the book In the Lion's Den, Navigating Systems of Power. And I'm going to go ahead and read from that excerpt. Top of the pyramid. Understand the dynamics of power structures. Systems of power are deliberately designed to cultivate a select group of leaders while cycling through subordinates as temporary talent. In truth, most pivotal decisions are made behind the scenes long before others witness the outcome. Many only confront the harsh reality when it's too late. So as we revisit that section in the book, it ties back to this principle of understanding when leaving is leverage. Another thing to note is this, for people who are saying, well, you know what, this person did this and this person responded and they just felt like they wanted to defend themselves. That is out of the question, right? Everybody took accountability for the role that they played and why their, counterpart, their colleague reacted the way that they did. And I respect both ladies for doing so, because accountability, it takes a lot, and they both took accountability in that regard. However, I want to highlight this thing, right? This principle. If you did research on your colleague, on your coworker, and you were not impressed with their past, with their background, at that moment, once you concluded that this person was not on your level, there was no need to respond. That's what I mean by thinking ahead and thinking with strategy, right? Now, some people may argue, well, she still felt the need to, defend herself and things like that. That's perfectly fine, but there's a different way of going about it. Don't fight fire with fire. Don't provoke somebody who is clearly trying to provoke you. You don't even give them the satisfaction. You don't even give them that opportunity. And this could be better understood by reading the section titled Never Play on Their Turf in the book Green Eyes. And of course, I'm going to briefly read from that excerpt as well. And the excerpt reads, once an envious person or envious persons have been identified, it's important you move accordingly. Moving accordingly is not just limited to personalities, but to environment. If you find yourself in a position where the person who is envious of you has more leverage, examples given, more allies, more knowledge, etc., this is not the time to operate from a place of ego and pride. So Kenya had seniority, but where Edie might have, now this is just me, hypothesizing based off of what we've been presented, of course, but where Edie had more leverage regarding this particular excerpt that I read from is clearly provoking Kenya. As Kenya stated in her confessional, she was like, I was actually very pleasant to Brittany. And it appeared as if she was kind of creating some kind of issue, or she might have internalized something that, Kenya said or something, and just Kenya wasn't aware of it. But nevertheless, if Kenya felt like she was being provoked and she wasn't necessarily giving this person any reasons to provoke her, do not stoop down to that person's level, especially when they're showing you that they have more ammunition in that arena. Bringing it back into context as far as knowing when to leave a situation, especially if you're being provoked in a professional capacity, is if you feel like there's no course of action being taken that is more so in your favor. That's where you might have to step back and take into consideration the bigger picture at play here, because there may be some other factors, such as, what some other viewers have mentioned. Well, maybe it was beneficial regarding budget cuts, or maybe some people felt like it was too much of a legal liability, so they went with, the lesser of two evils. In those instances, start preparing for your pivot. And in order for you to do so, you first have to control your emotions and think with clarity. Implement some kind of strategy. And unfortunately, most of the time, strategy requires you taking a hold of your emotions. And I'm actually going to read from another section in the book In the Lion's Den, Navigating Systems of Power, titled Contain Your Emotions, to provide some additional context. And the excerpt reads, Navigating systems of power requires mastering the art of stoicism. Even in moments of vulnerability, it's crucial to regain composure quickly. We're human, slip-ups happen, but emotions should never be the driving force in these environments. Now, as that excerpt explains, we are human and slip-ups are normal. So honing in on that human component, right? And what a lot of people have been arguing, well, we can't necessarily play victim if you know that you provoke someone and you get mad because you don't like the way that they react or respond. Completely fine argument. However, if that response is putting you in a jeopardizing position regarding your company, right? Regarding your position, your job, whatever, your legacy, etc., that's where taking a different course of action is going to be exceptionally important. And I'm actually going to read from the two excerpts that I've been referencing because it will be the title of this analysis. The first being the Know When to Hold 'Em, Know When to Fold 'Em excerpt in the book Green Eyes. And I'm going to go ahead and read from that. And the excerpt reads, this tactic is not meant to say one has been defeated as much as it's meant to acknowledge when it is best to no longer engage. As in the game poker, sometimes it's best to fold our hand when dealing with an envious individual rather than hold our hand and attempt to play it. Don't let pride and ego be your downfall. Those who win know how to step down. And the section reads, oftentimes we confuse the need to pivot with giving up or quitting. However, we must understand nothing is costlier than investing valuable resources and energy into a broken vessel. Not only do our efforts go to waste, but we also squander precious time. As tempting as it may be to prove a point, or better yet, to prove an opponent wrong, it isn't always the wisest course of action. In realms of power, the most successful individuals learn to subdue their egos for the greater good. So in sum, babes, just because you aren't playing a game doesn't mean that a game isn't being played against you. All right, babes, that's all that I have for this analysis today. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. But of course, I want to hear you all's comments, your opinions, your personal experiences in the comment section below. I look forward to speaking to you guys in the next one, babes. Take care.